Yo, what's up, guys? Brandon B back at you again, back at you with more news, more motivation, whatever you need is what I'm here to provide. And we want to talk about Terrence Crawford and Kell Brook. Now, there's a potential fight going on with these two guys, and obviously Terrence Crawford being arguably the pound for pound king right now. My opinion, I can't have him at number one right now because lack of competition in his recent fights. When you think of Jeff Horn, you think of, even though Jeff Horn did get the victory over Pacquiao, but that was a controversial victory, of course. Mir Khan, you think of Benavidez. Um, but when you think about Terrence Crawford, to me, I think of an all-world talent, and I think this is the fight that we just don't need. I think we need Terrence Crawford versus Spence, of course, or Terrence Crawford versus Pacquiao, because Pacquiao beat Keith Thurman, and he's shown that he is still one of the best. But I would say for sure we need Terrence Crawford versus Spence. I think these two guys, when you think about the two best welterweights in the world, especially in their prime, because at the end of the day, Pacquiao was, I think, 41 years old, 40, 41 years old, maybe 42. And when you think about him and his trajectory, right, we understand that he's not going to be at this level forever, right? And at the end of the day, he's not. I don't hold him to the same standard that I hold these two young fighters as anymore because of obviously the age. But Pacquiao is still one of the best, and if Pacquiao wants to face Terrence Crawford, then I would jump all over that fight and would be just as excited to see him face Spence as anyone else. But when you think about Spence versus Terrence Crawford, to me, you're talking about the two best welterweights in the world. And once again, in their prime, this is a fight that I think we do need. What we don't need is another Kell Brook situation, is another Amir Khan situation, is another situation where you have fighters who are the best at what they do, but can get away with this stuff, right? And so my thing is with boxing, and this is to me a great example of why we need only one champion per division, because in the division in boxing, I mean, you can have a legitimate claim to being a world champion. Although I don't believe Crawford even owns a world title at this weight right now, but nonetheless, you can have a legitimate claim to being a world champion just because of the nature of who you are. All right, and so the fact that there's four titles per division, oftentimes that makes it a little bit different, where you get to have guys who can move up and win different belts at different divisions and have a certain level of accomplishments that they wouldn't have if this were the old days, right back in the Joe Louis era, where there was one welterweight champion, one middleweight champion, one light heavyweight, and one heavyweight champion. And so, I always respect guys like Joe Louis, who was able to get 25 consecutive title defenses in an era where he was the only champion, right? So he was the only guy that was doing it. And so, which is even more impressive than B Hop's record of 20 consecutive, which is still impressive nonetheless. Let's not get it twisted. But this is not the fight that we need. I think Terrence Crawford has all the makings of one of the best fighters ever. But he's going to have to, in my opinion, he's going to have to start facing some of these guys that are in his way in terms of legacy fights, right? And so I think this guy is one of the best fighters in the world. And I don't make this to make any disparaging comments about him. I mean, for all we know, the negotiations could be going terrible. But once again, I do believe that negotiations look a little bit different when there's only one champion in each division. Because I think the fact is that pound for pound means so much in the sport of boxing, where you get to have fighters who get to just maneuver through different weight classes. And don't at times it looks like they get to go unchallenged, and I think that's a little bit different than obviously UFC. And I'm a bigger fan of boxing, although I do watch the UFC as well. But yeah, once again, I think this is a fight that we do not need to see. I think we already know what's going to happen. We're pretty sure Crawford's going to win. It's all about how good is he going to look, but he's going to win this fight. And but I think that we need to get back into these fights, these 50-50 fights. At the end of the day, you could be a superstar fighter, and we've seen it in the 80s with Tommy Hearns, Hagler, Leonard, Duran, where you could be a superstar fighter, and yet still it is going to be tough. It's still a 50-50 fight, and you don't know who can win because you're facing another superstar caliber fighter. Whereas I think a lot of times we get these what feels like tune-up fights, all like over and over and over and over again in the sport of boxing, where you just get non-stop tune-up fights. And I think once again, like I said, I think one champion will help this, because each, if you look at like the WBC, the IBF, the WBA, etc., they all have different rankings, and so you could be number one in another in one person's in one category, right, for the WBC, but be number 8 for the IBF. And I think that's kind of messing with the fans a little bit. And I think once again, I think if we get to the point where there's one champion, I don't know how they do it, whether it's a unification series or whether we just do away with some of the bodies. But I think we're going to have to do it. We need to do it. I think it's going to help the sport a tremendous amount, because the fact is that the casual fan does not know who the world champion is in each division. Oftentimes, they just know who the pound-for-pound guy is, whether it's a Pacquiao, whether it's a Floyd, whether it was back in the day De La Hoya, or Roy Jones, Mike Tyson, guys like that. But we don't know, and not we, but the casual fan does not know who the number one guy is. And I think they should. I think it should be easy to be seen who's the heavyweight champion. And that's really all I have. But there's definitely going to be more. Don't forget to check out the podcast, Rebel Thoughts. I'm always releasing new episodes. Last episode was with a financial advisor. So I'm always making new moves, trying to get better and better. I'm trying to be a little more consistent on this channel, as I have not been consistent as of late. But guys, appreciate your support as always. Take care.